In this anime, a middle-aged man named Taichi, he is a 38-year-old loser who picked the worst F-ranked skills and became the most OP player in the game. In his real life he had a job and worked hard to earn money, but instead of trying to find a girl to clap, he sat down at his desk to play a new virtual reality game. He thought he was an old loser and he even called himself an old geezer, but in the game he felt young again. He could do all sorts of amazing things that he couldn't do in real life. He decided to name his character Earth, and he made Earth look very ordinary and boring. He didn't want to stand out because he wasn't the type who wanted to be the main character. He couldn't play the game all day because he had to work and be responsible, so he could only play for a few hours every day. He worried that he might bother other players if he tried to play with them, so he mostly played by himself. When it came to choosing special abilities for Earth, he decided to pick skills that weren't very powerful. He chose things that weren't very good during the testing phase of the game. He did this so that the super serious gamers wouldn't pay much attention to him and he could play at his own pace. For example, he picked a skill called medicine, but it turned out to be pretty useless because he could easily buy healing potions from the game's non-player characters NPCs. He also chose a skill called kick, but it didn't have any fancy moves or special attacks, so he couldn't defeat enemies with just one kick. He even picked the skill of using a bow, but it had terrible accuracy. He tried to sneak skill, but it used up a lot of his character's magical power, and if he moved it was easy for enemies to spot him, so it wasn't great for running away from monsters. Lastly, he chose the skill for improved physical abilities, which was supposed to give a small bonus to running using weapons or crafting, but the bonus was really small. If someone wants to be strong, they should choose more special skills. With these not so great skills, Earth might have made the worst character ever in any game, but he liked it that way. By picking underpowered skills, other players avoided him so he could relax and play the way he wanted. He finally entered a game called One More Free Life Online. It was called that because players could enjoy another life without needing to complete the final boss quests. They could spend their time fighting monsters, making cool stuff, or just hanging out and chatting with other players. It was a game for people who weren't too happy with their real lives. On the first day of the game was released, the place was super crowded. A random girl called Earth over to sell him some equipment, but just then some heroes returned and Earth noticed there wasn't a single archer among them. Suddenly a guy dressed like a gold medal started making fun of Earth. Earth thought it was a terrible way to start his first day. The guy said bows were useless and called Earth weird, a dork, and a loser. He even made Earth like the floor. Earth felt awful and the guy finally left. People don't seem to like archers, but Earth is totally cool with that. At the training hall, Earth gets all excited watching others practice, so he decides to give it a go. Sadly, the only thing he hits is the ground. He quickly figures out he can't shoot arrows well at all, but he's determined to get better. He keeps trying, but it's a real struggle. He ends up hitting everything except the target and realizes it's even worse than he thought. After 100 shots, Earth celebrates because he reaches level 5 and tries out his kicking skills, which have gotten stronger. He also tries his wind spell and finds it's more accurate than his arrows. With the basic skills he needs to survive, Earth decides to go out into the field, but it's a total mess with all the new players around. He figures he'll gather herbs, but he notices that players can't tell what the things they pick up. So he tries to appraise them, but he fails a bunch of times. Eventually, though, he levels up his medical skills. Then he sees that one of the herbs he picked is super dangerous. It can stop someone's breathing and kill them if they eat it. Earth is really mad that the game developers put this deadly herb in the starting area, but he's glad he learned how to appraise things. Next, he buys a beginner's medicine crafting set and tries to make healing potions. Somehow he manages to make a common healing potion and he follows it up with a healing antidote. Then he discovered that once he made one thing, the game let him make a bunch of them. Earth remembered that people could buy potions really cheap from the game's non-player characters, so he thought maybe no one would want what he made, but his medicine skill reached level 7, so Earth decided to go hunting. Luckily there weren't as many players around, so he got the first chance at a beast. He knew that bows didn't shoot quickly, so that first shot was super important. He missed the target and the bunny got mad. Earth managed to shoot an arrow through the bunny's paw and gave it a knee to the tummy. To finish it off, he kicked the bunny and it went flying. Earth realized he was more of a kicker than an archer. Just then, two people showed up to say hi. There was a guy named Svi who could hardly stop laughing because the bunny had made a weird noise. He said something about humor being justice, which left Earth wondering if he was some kind of comedian. The girl's name was Millie and they asked if they could send Earth friend requests. Zai got all excited. Winners said yes, talking about how they could become a top comedy duo. They left and Earth went back to getting more experience, but he soon realized that the bunnies were pretty smart. Even when he tried to sneak up on them, they noticed him. His wind spell was able to defeat one of the little bunnies, but he wanted to try out his sneak spell to sneak up on another one. It worked. Earth pointed out that even though his bow never seemed to hit the target, when he combined it with his sneak spell he became really strong. Earth logged off because he knew the super serious gamers would stay up all night play, but he had to work in the morning. The next day, Earth had some terrible tasting bread for breakfast and decided to make his own food. He seized on the steak to make it taste amazing, but he realized he didn't really know what he was doing. The first try tasted awful and he got a score of just 2, so he made some adjustments, and the second time it tasted fantastic, but he wanted it to be even better. As he channeled his inner chef, the delicious smell attracted everyone nearby. Earth finished his dish and got a score of 7, but all the townspeople showed up demanding some. Earth didn't want to give it away for free, so he set a really high price, and he was surprised to see they were willing to pay. He spent the whole evening cooking, which raised his cooking level to 20, and he even learned the skill that made him cook much faster. Later Earth decided to make a bowl. There wasn't much demand for bows, so archers had to make their own. His first bowl was very basic, so it only got a score of 3 and an attack power of 4, but his next bow was a lot better. He used 3 pieces of wood and sanded down some parts so they fit together perfectly. It was a big improvement and had an attack power of 12. Finally, Earth upgraded his super plane look with some cool armor. He checked his stats and was happily surprised by how much he's improved, but he was running low on money, so he put some food and a grape-flavored healing potion and a vending machine to see if anyone would buy them. After that, we saw Earth making a ton of progress. He defeated some really tough beasts, and it was way easier with his homemade bow and leveled up skills. When he got back to the vending machine, he found a bunch of nice letters from people who loved his stuff. Everything was going better than he'd ever imagined, but things took a bad turn. A new system attacked them all and they had to hurry back to town. Everyone was in a big panic, looking for someone with the medicine skill and begging for potions. Earth was confused because he thought they could just buy potions from the game's NPCs, but Zai explained that the NPCs were saying they didn't have any. This was a problem for Earth because he knew everyone would beg him for the potions he left in the vending machine. Without a second to rest, people started begging for potions. So Earth said they could only buy a limited amount and set a really high price. Surprisingly, everyone agreed to pay the high price without complaining. The nice notes on the vending machines turned into demands for Earth to hurry up, and his friends showed up to help. Zai handled the crowd and Millie offered to take care of the money. Earth ran out of potions, so the people decided to come back the next day. But then a really annoying shiny wart appeared and demanded that Earth give him all the potions. Earth said no, so Ward Fitz threatened him. Earth finally stood up for himself and told the bully that the townspeople were the ones who really needed the potions. He told Ward to wait like everyone else, but the bully tried to pay him. Earth warned him not to do that because the game's NPCs might stop selling weapons and armor and they'd have to rely on crafters. The bully would have to learn how to get along with other players. The guy didn't want to hear it and challenged Earth to a fight. Zai warned Earth not to, but Earth wouldn't let someone boss others around, so he accepted the challenge and decided to use the bully's overconfidence to find a weak spot. The shiny ward started with a powerful attack, but Earth dodged it easily. He found the guy's weak spot and shot an arrow right through his neck. Of course, the bully was shocked and Earth was declared the winner. Earth was really humble about winning and promised to have more potions. The next day he logged off, thinking his day had been a success, and he figured those bullies might quit the game. Things continue. Several days passed after the incident with the missing potions, and the game had a big change. Earth saw that now knowing how to use medicine was important. People realized that even the NPCs could run out of stuff, and that's why they started thinking about learning medicine. Earth got back into the game and thanks Zai for inviting him to the guild. Zai introduced the other members of their team, starting with a big guy named Reiji. He uses a one-handed axe and a shield and said he'd make the enemies come after him. Then a girl named Nora introduced herself. She said she's good at fighting up close with short swords, but she warned everyone not to call her flat or a cutting board or she wouldn't be friendly. The last person was Kazumine, and he was super good with a sword. Earth tried to introduce himself, but they stopped him because everyone was talking about how strong he was. Earth didn't want to stand out because he had just shown a bully a lesson. Earth noticed that their team was kind of unbalanced with 4 melee fighters, 1 mage and an archer but Zai explained that Millie could use different kinds of magic and Nora could do healing magic. Zai said their first mission was to beat a wild bear. Everyone was excited and confident they could do it, but Earth didn't know where all that confidence was coming from. Zai tells Earth that they're all depending on him to carry the team. Earth like, wait, I've never seen a wild bear before. I heard they're super fast, smart, and tough to beat, but Zai ignores his worries and promises Earth he'll cook something yummy once they're done. Excited, everyone heads out, but Earth isn't as thrilled. Then they spot some wild bears, but they're in a group, so they pick one they can all gang up on. The others realize that Earth's long-distance vision skill is pretty handy and having him around is valuable. Millie buffs Vi and they plan to lure one of the bears away. Earth decides to use his sneak skill and shoots an arrow into the back of the bear's neck, but he didn't think about what to do when it gets mad. Thankfully Reiji the tank jumps in to take the aggro. Earth explains that monsters have something called aggro, which shows who they're mad at. Reiji has high defense, so he'll make the Reiji angry at him and protect everyone. Earth hides in some bushes to attack from a distance, while Millie heals Reiji and Nora joins in to do some damage too. The group attacks, but they quickly figure out that the bear's skin is super tough. Millie tries a fire spells to get the bear's attention and it works, making Reiji the target again. The fight is getting tough and Zai realizes he may have underestimated their opponent. Earth sees things going south and knows he has to make a quick decision. He trusts his 38 years of life experience and takes a risky bet. He aims between the bear's eyes thinking it's the weak spot. It seems like it worked, but it actually doesn't and they all wonder if they're done for. The bear has way too much HP. Earth goes for his last option. The others worry about his safety, but Earth dives in and uses a spell he learned at Wind Magic level 15. He gets super fast for 10 seconds and pushes his arrow deeper into the beast's skull. Millie follows up with a strong fire spell. Finally they defeat the beast and they realize the fight was way harder than they thought. Afterward, Earth cooks for the group and everyone is amazed at how tasty it is. They wonder if it's expensive to make such good food. Earth explains that it's not. The only problem is that the recipes can't be bought because crafters have an unspoken rule not to treat them. One reason recipes can't be traded is because making them takes a lot of time and money. The second reason is even if two people have the same recipe, the stuff they make might turn out really different. Recipes are like the hard work and creativity of the people who made them. You can copy the recipe, but you can't copy the quality. Zai thinks Earth should always cook for them for cheap and everyone agrees, even though Earth doesn't really want to, but they don't listen to him. They all ask to be friends and Earth's first adventure with the party goes well, but in the next scene something bad happens. Earth got too confident after beating a monster on his own and decided to go into the 5th area in the forest. He attacked an ant and they called its friends. Earth kept fighting, but the ant could reflect damage. He couldn't move and he knew he was in trouble. Earth got a penalty for dying and was sent back to town. He admits it was his fault for being too sure of himself and decides he needs to do better next time. Then all players get a message about a big update called the Fairy Ball. It will have new skills and items for crafters, plus fairies to help them in their adventures. Earth knows that other players will be leveling up too, so he can't afford to get more penalties from dying. Later we see that Earth worked hard to get rid of his heavy penalty and learn how to be a blacksmith. He doesn't want to make the same mistake again, so he decides to make an arrowhead that can pierce through the tough hand skin. First he gets 2 types of iron. One is regular iron for piercing and the other is super pure iron for smashing. He attaches the iron arrowhead to a wooden arrow, making an iron arrow with 7 attack points. Then he makes a mace-like arrowhead for smashing. Earth is sure he'll meet more enemies that can reflect damage and kicking doesn't let him use a weapon, so he had short spikes to the bottom of his boots and a blade on the side to solve both problems. Even though it's a prototype, it's useful, giving him 12 attack points and 2 extra defenses, but he wants to test it and make it better. Then a couple of mean guys come by and make fun of his boots. They wonder if they're boots or weapons. Earth proudly says they're both and the guys feel bad because they can't do anything except be mean. Later, Earth goes to a shop and buys some boot string. The shop girl notices his unique boots and is kind of scared when Earth tells her he plans to use them to fight ants. She's impressed because she thought he was just a chef. As for his bow, Earth explains that he reached archery level 30 and now needs to pick a specialization. He has 3 choices: short bows, long bows, and hunting bows. Short bows are easy to use but have a short range and they're not good for him because he's not a melee fighter. Long bows have range and power but take a long time to shoot, which isn't good for solo players. so he decides to pick the hunting bow, which has the same range and power as his old one, and it's a more powerful skill. Earth starts making his new bow and chooses a design he likes. The blacksmith named Black sees what he's working on and is surprised because he's never seen a bowl like this before. Earth finishes the unusual bow, which he calls the X bow, and it has 32 attack points. This new bow needs more strength to pull back than his old one, but it feels great and is a lot more powerful. Earth gets all sentimental with his old bow, thanking it for being awesome, but then he quickly gets excited to try out his new bow. The next day, he goes back to the forest determined to get revenge. He finds a solo ant and smacks it with his smashing arrow. The ant tries to reflect the damage, but Earth finishes it off with his pointy arrow. But that's not enough. He wants to wipe out more hands to feel better, so he goes on an ant smacking spree. Later he stands in front of all the smashed ants and claims his victory, but it doesn't seem like he's done with his revenge yet. Earth drags the ant corpses through town because he wants to use them to make new armor. Then he hears about the fairy ball starting and sees a crystal. He hopes he can make a contract with the wind fairy because he's an archer. He starts the ritual and the crystal shakes a lot, but then breaks just like his heart. Later Earth talks this way and tells them about his failed fairy ritual. Everyone else succeeded with theirs and encourages Earth not to give up. They say there might be a chance in the second half of the event and the broken item doesn't disappear, so he has another shot. Zwei is relieved about solving one problem but wonders why all the fairies seem to like Earth so much. The story continues. Earth is simply relaxing in the shadow when a small light particle approaches him. He gets up and mentions that for some reason fairies have been friendly toward him in the past days. He lets the fairy rest on his finger and apologizes for not being able to form a contract, all because his crystal is broken. The small fairy then starts playing with the crystal and he checks his stat window. He notices that his skill levels have gone up, which allows him to spend 3 XP points to specialize in another skill. He quickly accepts the trade, thinking that he will be able to fight in a new way if he can master new skills. He decides to try that new skill in his first dungeon. He explores the dark cave and remembers that he used to do the same when he was a small boy. Thankfully to his skill set, he manages to avoid dangerous areas filled with traps. He continues to think about the old times, feeling excited about exploring in total darkness. He thought he could never experience it again, but this game allows him to have the same feeling. He then notices some red lights in a dark area. Turns out it's a spider that attacks him. He's quick to shoot it with his bow and follows up with the windcutter attack. However, to his surprise, the monster is still alive. The spider attacks him again, forcing him to use one of his new skills, high jump. Despite head-butting the ceiling, Earth manages to land behind the spider. He follows by using a whip to pull the spider into him and uses his new boots to finish the monster off. The spider's corpse disappears, but some strange purple light appears. He realizes that it's darkness fairies and decides to follow them. They take him through some dangerous path, but he manages to stay safe due to his stable center of gravity skill. However, he is surprised when he reaches the path's end. There are a huge number of fairies gathered around a boulder and he decides to investigate. He pulls Boulder to the side and finds a secret door. He opens it up and finds a box with an old ring inside. He decides to keep it as a memory of his adventures and thanks the fairies. At that same moment, the game masters released a new message. They are announcing the second half of the Fairy Ball event. Its name is the Fairy Battle Tournament. He quickly returns to the main city to watch the official announcement. The game masters reveal their fairies will evolve if they participate. All they need is to win a certain number of players versus player fights. If they manage to, their fairies will evolve and get a new form. However, they cannot fight the same opponents. They also explain the top 16 players will be invited to a tournament with new amazing rewards. Also, with this new game update, players will be able to get titles to show off. However, there will be some rare titles based on their playstyle. They also announce the most important thing to Earth. People who have failed to make a contract with the fairy will be able to repair their crystal as they fight against players, and those repaired crystals will not only have a guaranteed success rate to get a fair, but there's a high chance of getting an S rank one. They will also implement a new system where fairies will have an identity and their personality. Everyone gets excited, including Earth. However, he feels like players will start targeting craftsmen who aren't good in combat. He decides to talk about it with his craftsman friends, but they assure him they will be fine. They basically agreed to blacklist anyone who tries to force them into a fight, which in short means that if someone targets them, that person won't be able to buy anything forever. Earth is glad they already found a way to protect themselves. Blacks then ask him if he has already gone to the new town. He then explains to Earth that he can use the warp portal to get there, but also warns him that there are a huge number of hardcore PvP players gathering there. Blacks also reveals that some people are taking their time and are meeting up to fight in first. Earth thinks that's pretty normal in a game and asks if Blacks will fight someone in first. However, Black simply cares about crafting new items. Earth thinks that's also a way to enjoy the event, but he isn't sure about what he should be doing. A few days later, the new game patch is fully online and Earth logs in. He decides to check the new title system first. However, everyone around is staring at him, mentioning that Earth's title is rare. He opens the stat window and finds out that his title is the Fairy Playboy. To make it worse, he cannot even hide the title from other players unless he fights one special PvP battle during the event. Earth cannot believe this is happening to him. Everyone, including him, is confused. He thinks this title is humiliating, but at the same time some fairies start gathering around him. He then decides to fight a battle to remove it. He shouts for help, begging someone to fight him. The girl named Rona appears to save the day and sends him a challenge. He starts crying in happiness and thanks her for her help. She recognizes him, but he doesn't know who she is. She explains to him that she belongs to the Blue Colors Vice Guild. She mentions that she uses martial arts and she's curious about earth kicks. He's about to accept the duel invitation when Rona's fairy flies into his shoulder. Earth is confused, especially because the fairy seems like it's been charmed. Rona is also confused, explaining her fairy is usually shy. Suddenly the fairy presses the reject duel button. Earth is confused, thinking that Rona doesn't want to fight him, but she gets embarrassed, explaining she doesn't know what her fairy wants. The fairy gets back to Earth's shoulder and starts cuddling him. Everyone around is confused, but they understand that his title doesn't lie. Earth is a fairy playboy, and despite his tries to duel against someone, they all ended in the same way. The fairies refuse to fight him. Rona mentions she has never seen this before, and Earth starts cursing the game masters. He returns to his usual gaming day, which means doing nothing useful until he's contacted by Rona. She wants some advice because her fairy refuses to eat most of what she gives it. He guesses that she wants him to make some food which the fairy will eat. She's surprised and asks how he knew. Turns out his food stand has a huge cube because everyone on the server has the same problem. She asks how that did happen. Turns out that a few hours ago someone tried to feed their fairy with bread. The fairy rejected and the owner asked her to cook something due to his skill. Fairy loved it and the word spread around, and now everyone is asking for huge amounts of food for their fairies. To be fair, Earth tried too hard to not stand out, but the opposite happens every single time. In the end, Rona appeared to help in the food stall and they quickly dealt with the customers. They thank each other for the help, and Earth explains he will be closing the shop because people are now starting to make fairy food. Rona asks what he will be doing from now on, and he realizes that he's been so occupied that he hasn't checked the new patch features. She then invites him to check the new town together and they warp there. Earth is pretty impressed by the new town named Nexia, and they decide to check the PvP area. The two competitors are a guy with a blue parrot and a guy with a wolf. Rona quickly notices something weird about the wolf and asks Earth about it. He explains she's right, but they decide to watch the fight. The parrot guy uses his fairy cast wind magic and the two players start battling out with their swords. It's an intense duel, but they seem good as they block each other's attacks. The wolf guy manages to push the other back and orders his wolf to use a fire attack. However, the wolf pulls a Pikachu move and ignores his owner. The guy is confused, telling the wolf to hurry up, but every command is refused. Rona and Earth are confused about what's happening. Usually fairies don't disobey commands. The parrot then uses lightning magic on the guy and its owner finishes the opponent off with his sword. The duel ends and Rona asks if Earth knows why the wolf fairy ignored its master's commands. He states the other dude is a slave fairy user. Rona is confused by that term, but Earth explains that's the term they use for people who abuse their fairies. Basically, the guy decided to force the wolf to do what he wanted by hitting it. Therefore the wolf now refuses to listen to him. The guy then gets up completely annoyed and prepares to hit the fairy wolf as revenge for not obeying. Earth quickly realizes that something bad is about to happen. Rona asks him what's going on and he explains that he once saw an online video of a slave fairy user. Basically, he mistreated the fairies so much that the system decided to punish him with the guy had to fight his own fairy. Not only that, but the guy's fairy evolved into an S rank. In the end, the guy lost the fight, took away his contract crystal. Luckily, this time's idiot knew what would happen and decided to walk away. Ronan didn't know about this system, but Earth explained some old games used this type of system. Basically, he reveals that in those games the pets can go out of control or attack her if she gives too many unreasonable orders. She thinks the type of system is too old, yet Earth simply mentions that the current games go easy on players. Therefore he thinks the game masters are trying to make this game based on an old-school MMO. He then says his goodbye, explaining he will be logging out. In the real world, Earth removes his VR headset, thinking that some people like Rona really care about their fairies, yet there are some people who don't. But he understands that it's up to the players to play however they want. He later logs back into the game and focuses on crafting. He's then approached by the other slave fairy user. The guy reveals he wants to talk to Earth because of his title. Earth is annoyed by it, but hears the guy out. Turns out this metal dude wants to know how to make up with his fairy. As you expect, the wolf's behavior toward Earth is caring and gentle. The guy explains he knows what will happen to him if he keeps acting like this and asks for Earth's help. Earth asks why the guy was mean to the wolf. In short, the guy was confused by the system and looked for videos online. Everyone was uploading videos where they treated their fairies badly or like circus animals, so the guy followed the same behavior. However, with the new patch, fairies got a personality and everything changed. The wolf refused to listen to him and he even hit it sometimes to make it obey him. The guy regrets doing it and asks for Earth help again, even promising to pay him. Our boy refuses to get paid but tells the guy to not treat the wolf as he used to. He then gives the guy some advice. You know the basic stuff, start treating your wolf like a friend. The guy is confused, but Earth goes in deep. He tells him to fight, share a meal, and take breaks together. He even tells him to say goodbye to the wolf every time he logs out. That way his wolf will slowly see him as a friend and follow his commands. Then Earth, to make something delicious for his wolf to eat, he quickly prepares it and the guy feeds his wolf first. Despite being suspicious, the wolf accepts the food. The guy starts tearing down, realizing that his companion is starting to slowly accept him. He thanks Earth and walks away with his fairy. However, there is someone who finds the whole situation interesting. Earth asks who this guy is, and the guy answers that he's Silver, someone who wants to talk to Earth in private. The story continue. In the game world is a fairy player with no fairy to himself. Didn't turn out to be easy. Well, Earth had never imagined it would be easy for him. Regardless, on this day he receives a weird visitor. The visitor is someone he doesn't know before, so he tries to assume who the person is by looking at his dress. The player has a very good costume on himself and he has a great defense item. It doesn't take Earth a great time for him to assume who the person is. He assumes his visitor has to be one of the greatest and strongest players in the virtual world, because for him to afford all that he is putting on he must be top of the league. He wonders what the man could have come to tell him and he listens to his discussion. The man asks him if he knows a man named Glad. Earth has never heard of the name before, nor has he come into contact with such a person. He replies in negation and the man seems pleased to hear that. He wonders why the man thinks he could know Glad. So he asks who Glad is. The man tells him that Glad is a former member of his party. Although Glad has very bad behavior, he is actually a very talented tanker. His strength gets a hold of him whenever he behaves irrationally. Earth connects the dots and realizes that for that man to visit him, Glad is no longer at his party. So he asks to know why Glad left the party. The man informs Earth that he heard Glad is out for fairy play of players and he has been trying to challenge them on PvP, even whether they are interested or not. To answer Earth's question, the man asks his fairy to come out. His fairy is a very beautiful light Valkyrie and immediately Earth sees it. Earth is in awe of how awesome the fairy looks. The man tells Earth that being a top party member, Glad is known to bully the other party members and make them feel like they are nothing. His strength speaks for him and it continues like that till the event starts. When the new event starts and all the party members get their fairy, it turns out Glad is the only one who didn't get a fairy. He gets jealous of the other members, especially because he thinks he is stronger than them and he deserves better than them. He can't take the humiliation of being left behind, so he attacks them. As the leader of the party, the man has to protect his other members, so he sends Glad out of his party. However, when the modification was made to the game and a new crystal was sent for people who didn't get a fairy, Glad was lucky to get a new crystal and he got a fairy. He got a Darkness Fox fairy and he makes it a duty for himself to fight against anyone with a fairy player. Earth figures that Glad couldn't get over the humiliation despite the fact that he has gotten a fairy. The man thinks it is his fault that Glad is like that and he doesn't want anyone to get hurt because of his fault, so he has taken it upon himself to warn everyone who deserves to be warned about Glad. He says he would have to challenge Glad to a duel eventually and bring Glad to order, but before then Earth should be very careful and he should watch out for Glad. Earth appreciates the man for his advice, and he sees the man off. After the man leaves, he thinks of what he has heard. He knows it is not advisable for him to make a decision based on one part of the story, but it would be better if he at least watch out for the man named Glad so he wouldn't fall victim. He decides to go hunting in the field. One of the most important roles in the game is that no player is allowed to challenge another player on a PvP when the player is hunting, so he decides that even if he meets Glad there, Glad can't do anything to him. He takes it upon himself to hunt every time to save himself from doom. He tries to kill a wild boar. He first shoots the boar with his arrow by the middle of his eyes, but the boar gets furious and tries to attack him back. He combines his wind magic and his arrow magic, then jumps towards the boar and hits the boar with his spike boot. The boar dies immediately and he takes the meat. He realizes that he has gotten better with his kick, and he even upgrades his kick art. He appreciates the new upgrade in the game because it made the game easier to understand. The following day he goes to the town of Nexia to hunt for some metal. He breaks the rocks to find metals, and he eventually sees an explosive ore again. He announces to the other people to be careful because he knows if he makes a mistake while carrying the ore that could explode. He carries it carefully and puts it in a bag before informing the others that they can continue what they are doing. They all talk about how delicate and explosive ore is and how it could kill them all. He goes to Blacks to learn blacksmithy while Blacks wonder what he wants to create again. Blacks call him weird for his creations. He wants to create a new era for himself and the metal whip. He wants a twister arrow that can stab and create injury to any animal. He tries to twist the metal, but he finds it very difficult, and after trying it out over the night, he successfully does it and names it a twister arrow. He also creates a new whip, making the triangle blade whip. Blacks arrive the following day and see his wonderful creations. He tells him he has done well, and Earth leaves. Earth goes to the formation shop to find a hidden place to work on the explosive ores. He is directed to the basement because if it explodes there it can't injure anyone else but him. He wants to try out his medical skills by creating some explosive portions. He creates about 3 portions and takes them to an open field to test them. At the field, he throws the first portion, but it doesn't explode. When he throws the second portion, it explodes so hard that it destroys the entire area and also drains about 80% of his HP. He feels that portion would be too hard for him, but in a situation where he is fighting and he is almost dead, he could use it, so he names it the Hellmine oil. He tries the last one, which is moderate enough for him. He names that the enhanced oil. He goes on to use the enhanced oil to kill some monsters. He first throws it, then uses his bow to finish them. It makes his work so easy that he levels up his wind and arrow skill to level 50. Following his leveling up, he gets a notification that he can combine his wind and arrow magic together. The system asks if he really wants the offer, and he picks yes and then goes to try out his new skill. After hunting wild bears, Japanese Oppenheimer tries out his new Gatling arrows on poor tree and attacks it as if he is using a burst life. After testing out the Gatling arrows and realizing that his skills are too low to have perfect aim when using this technique, Earth moves on to the next trick he has learned and uses his skill called Fly, which lets him fly, or more specifically leap forward for a moment. Earth explains that he is actually using wind magic on his feet before jumping, which gives them more momentum, and that is why he looks like he has drank a jump potion or something. Now that Earth feels satisfied with the practice session, he returns to the city and heads to the marketplace first to use the bear loot he collected today for better armor. The shop owner gets impressed seeing how many skins their regular customer has brought today. She assumes that he wants better edge gear. Earth states that he wants to reduce how much damage he takes from the bears and asks her to do some magic with her stuff so that his armor on his backside isn't terribly defenseless like women's armor, which is typically just a bra. The system suddenly sends an announcement in the sky to all players that the game developers are officially done with the scoring for the previous Fairy PvP event and that it is now time to announce who the winner is. Zai comes there, giving Earth the bad news that nobody from their guild made any real progress, which means that their guild won't probably come close to the leaderboards. More importantly, there are only 16 slots to enter the actual Fairy PvP tournament, so Earth doesn't think that they ever stood a chance anyway. So he tells Vi not to worry about this event anymore, but he himself decides to listen to the system announcing the players who have earned the right to enter the final tournament, and surprisingly, he notices that the old man in the knight armor named Silver, who warned him about the fairy player Hunter Glad, is on the list, and Glad himself is on the list as well because Earth knows how much of a dispute both Silver and Glads have. He wonders what will happen in this tournament and if it's going to cause the two players' relationship to deteriorate even more. He imagines these two pros going against each other in battle, and that sense of excitement makes him want to see their fight even more. Soon after, the real tournament begins at a beautifully animated arena with no CGI used whatsoever. And the end NPC host of the tournament welcomes everyone for coming to the special tournament server, implying the tournament is taking place on a different server and not in the actual game. Anyway, the host hopes that everyone will enjoy the show today and encourages everyone to cheer for the fighters who will be fighting for the winning troop. Earth, Zvi, and Millie stood together in the stands rooting for no one because they don't know who the contestants are except for Earth. Of course, as he is acquainted with Silver, even though Earth is sitting way far from the actual arena because he is cheap and bought the cheapest tickets here. But thanks to his thousands of skills and abilities, he finds a relevant skill to enhance his vision named Long Distance Vision, and as he activates it, holographic cool sunglasses appear on his eyes, letting him zoom in clearly in the long distance. Being a fairy player, Earth first looks for other fairy players and feels glad that there are actually other people who are suffering from success just like him. Shortly after, the host begins the first battle, and as it ends with two high-level plot irrelevant players going at it, Earth claims that he wouldn't have stood a chance if he somehow entered this tournament because of how weak he and his fairy would be in comparison to the two fighters who are currently battling against each other, as the blue Aquaman wins the battle and kills the unfortunately weak guy. He showcases his penguin fairy's beauty to everyone and makes them cheer him on. More crazy battles like this happen that don't get animated because of the budget. And of course there is the possible copyright strike by Nintendo for using their cash cow, which is Pokemon. Finally, in the plot, the relevant final match comes between Silver with his Valkyrie fairy and Glad, the egoistic self-proclaimed fairy hunter. They talk trash to each other before their fight begins, and as the host rings the bell, Silver tells Glad that he will discipline him today. Glad gladly accepts the challenge, and because they are both former party members, they seem to know a lot about each other, including what type of attack moves they use. While the old man is using a battle axe, Glad tries to overpower him using his Claymore greatsword. That's when Silver's Valkyrie comes to lend him some support and fires her fairy attack at Glad, but Gladwell Fairy stops Valkyrie attack with its own energy blast, and so the crazy battle continues in a stalemate. Zvi finds it absolutely amazing that the top two fighters can go to such a level and gets left totally speechless. Earth wonders what Silver intends to do here since he promised that he would take responsibility for what will happen. Silver's Valkyrie looks to be quite the help, as she does her best to distract Glad, so much that Silver gets the time to charge his signature attack on Moon Crescent and uses it against Glad. But Glad at the nick of time dodges the attack using a move called Wind Boost and moves away, leaving both Silver and Earth in complete disbelief. Earth specifically cannot believe that Glad also knows how to use wind magic and realizes that this is going to set the difference between these two fighters. That does seem to be the case, as Glad successfully lands his signature attack cross-line on Silver and finishes both him and his fairy, winning the tournament pretty easily. With this win, Glad's wolf evolves into an actual fairy and tells him that she cannot allow him to have another moment of success. She informs everyone about the purpose of this event, which was to select the next ruler of the fairies, and since it is clear that Glad is not the most worthy one to be the ruler, she decides to leave his side, telling him that he is only obsessed with revenge. Now that she has become the Fairy Queen after winning the tournament, she no longer wishes to be treated as a tool, but Glad doesn't want to let her go and decides to fight her to restrain her from her freedom. Obviously, that is a big mistake by him because the Fairy Queen reveals herself to be a master of all elements, blasts Glad with all her magical powers, and leaves him alive at 1 HP to make him look even more petty with the Fairy Queen attaining her freedom. She summons the three fairy players to the stage, including Earth, and gives them a reward for not making their fairies fight like Pokemon. But because Earth is a special case, the Fairy Queen tells him with a big wicked smile on her face and he will have to fight her. That brings the episode to an end. Thanks for watching. Want next part? Subscribe the channel and turn on notification bell.